The day I found my father-in-law measuring my grass with a ruler while I was at work was the day I decided to drive him crazy using $400 worth of yard statues. It worked better than I expected and things got unexpectedly serious. Hey Reddit, my father-in-law thought he was the king of lawns. Always judging mine like it was a crime scene. One day I caught him measuring my grass with a ruler. That's when I decided to fight back. But first, let me explain how it started. My name's Evan. I'm 34, married to Claire, and work as a project coordinator for a logistics company, mostly spreadsheets, calls, and chasing people about deadlines. Claire's 32, teaches 3rd grade, and somehow stays calm while handling 30 loud kids every day. We've been married for 3 years. No kids yet, though her mom brings that up like it's her part in a play. We used to live above a bakery. It always smelled like bread, which was great until the 4 a.m. delivery started. So, when we finally bought a house, it felt like a promotion. It's nothing fancy. 1-story, quiet street right next door to Claire's parents. Close enough for dinners, but with our own space. The house came with a yard, which was new for me. Where I grew up, yard work meant pulling a few weeds once a month. Claire, on the other hand, had been raised under the rule of her dad, Harold, the most lawn-obsessed man I've ever met. She used to joke about him mowing in diagonals and timing the watering cycle. I thought she was exaggerating. She wasn't. Harold's a retired mechanical engineer in his mid-60 seconds. The kind of man who keeps a notebook in his shirt pocket to write down observations. His wife, Linda, is the total opposite. Talkative, easygoing, the type who will show you cat photos before saying hello. She keeps him from driving everyone insane, but not enough to stop him from turning his yard into a science project. Claire warned me before we moved in. He's going to comment on everything, just nod and smile. I thought she meant the house. She meant everything. My mowing, the driveway slope, probably the way I parked. The first week in the new place was peaceful. Claire unpacked. I set up the internet. And at night, we'd sit on the porch and listen to sprinklers clicking down the street. For once, life felt settled. Then, we had her parents over for dinner. Claire cooked lasagna. I mowed just enough to make the yard look decent. They arrived right on time. Harold impressed cockies, Linda with a tray of brownies wrapped in foil. Harold shook my hand, looked me up and down, and immediately said, "Nice place, though. Your mailbox leans about 2 degrees to the left." I thought he was joking. I laughed. He didn't. "You'll want to fix that before winter," he added. "Frost will make it worse." Claire groaned. "Dad, please, we just moved in, just helping," he said, smiling in a way that didn't look like smiling. Dinner went fine after that. Linda asked about my job, Claire told school stories. And Harold quietly eyed the window like he was waiting for the grass to do something wrong. After dessert, he said, "You should see the improvements I made to my irrigation system. It'll take 5 minutes." We followed him because saying no to Harold feels like breaking a rule. His house sits on a corner lot and the lawn looks fake. Every blade the same height, edges sharp as if cut with scissors, flower beds arranged in this perfect ovals, solar lights spaced evenly like soldiers. The Japanese maple by the porch looked trimmed by computer. He opened the garage and revealed rows of hanging tools, each labeled rake, edger, trimmer. A laminated calendar listed mowing dates, watering times, and fertilizer formulas. "This," he said proudly, "is consistency." I nodded. Claire rolled her eyes. Then he pulled out a laminated sheet and handed it to me. Across the top, it said Evan's Quick Start Lawn Guide. It had mowing diagrams, watering schedules, and a grass blade height reference table. I stared at it. "Wow, this is detailed." He nodded. "Serious. You'll thank me later." A good lawn reflects good character. Linda laughed and told him to leave us alone before he started assigning homework. On the walk home, Claire said, "Don't take it personally. He really thinks he's helping." "Yeah," I said, staring at the laminated sheet tucked under my arm like a rule book. That night, I looked out at our yard. It wasn't bad. Some uneven patches, a few weeds, but definitely fine. Still, the image of Harold's perfect lawn under the streetlight stuck with me. Mine looked dull beside it. The next morning, while taking out the trash, I saw him in his driveway, watering his grass with slow, careful movements. He waved. I waved back. As he turned, I noticed the silver tape measure hanging from his belt. He pulled it out, let it snap back, and smiled faintly. "Consistency is love," he called. I just nodded and went inside. Claire was at the counter making coffee. "Your dad just told me consistency is love," I said. She didn't even look up. "Yeah, he used to say that about folding laundry." I tried to laugh, but as I glanced back through the window, he was still watering. Each sweep of the hose, the same as the last. It wasn't gardening. It was control. Every inch of that lawn obeyed him. And me? I had a yard full of slightly crooked grass right next door. At the time, I told myself it was harmless, just Harold being Harold, but standing there with that laminated guide and his words echoing in my head, I couldn't shake the feeling that something small had just shifted. I didn't know it then, but that was the first crack in what would turn it into a very weird war. The first weekend, after moving in, I finally had time to really mow the yard. I'd already done a Minico, quick pass before Claire's parents came for dinner. Today, I unpacked the mower that came with the house, cleaned the old gas out, and gave it a proper tune-up. The blades weren't great, but they worked. I wasn't going for perfection. Just not embarrassing. I set the blade height where it looked right, started cutting, and 20 sweaty minutes later, the grass looked even enough to me. There were no perfect lines like Harold's lawn, but it was green, short, and clean. I figured that was the end of it. The next day, I came home early from work because one of my afternoon meetings got canceled. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed someone bent over in my front yard. For a split second, I thought it was a kid or maybe a delivery guy dropping something. Then, the person straightened up and I saw the khaki shorts, tucked in polo, and shiny tape measure in his hand. Harold, he was, kneeling in the middle of my grass, holding the tape against a patch near the walkway. Squinting at the numbers, he had a small clipboard tucked under one arm. I sat there in the car for a few seconds, watching through the windshield like maybe I'd misread the situation. Nope. He knelt down again, measured another patch, and started writing something down. I got out of the car and tried to keep my voice calm. "Hey, Harold, what's going on?" He looked up, not even embarrassed. "Your grass height varies by almost a full inch," he said, like he was announcing a medical diagnosis. "You'll want to address that before it spreads." "Before it spreads," I repeated. He nodded. "Seriously, inconsistent mowing encourages uneven growth patterns. I thought I'd document the problem so I can show you the proper procedure. This weekend." I blinked at him. "You're documenting my grass. It's for your benefit, Evan. No need to get defensive." He made another note and added, "You used a dull blade. It tears instead of cutting. I can bring my sharpener over." I took a slow breath. "Maybe don't measure my yard while I'm not home, okay?" He adjusted his glasses. "It's good to be proactive." "Yeah," I said, "but it's also good to stay on your own side of the property line." He gave this tiny smirk. "Technically, I'm standing right on it." Then he snapped the tape measure back into its case, jotted one last thing on his clipboard, and said, "You'll thank me later," before walking off like nothing happened that night. I told Claire. She put her hands over her face and groaned. "He didn't tell me he didn't." "He did. Clipboard and everything." She sighed. "I'll talk to him. He probably thought he was helping. Helping would be offering to fix my mower, not treating me like a science project." She gave me a look that said, "Drop it." I did mostly. But the next morning, when I opened the front door, there was a neatly folded sheet of paper under the doormat. It was typed and formatted like a report with categories and bullet points. The title read, "Yard Assessment, 1529, Oakwood Drive for Review." Each section had a score out of 10. Blade height 6 out of 10. Uneven, evidence of tear marks. Edging 5 out of 10, could improve precision. Clippings, 8 out of 10. Decent removal. Curb presence, 4 out of 10. Slightly unbalanced. At the bottom was a note, recommendation. Adjust mower blade and adopt cross-pattern technique. There was no signature, but the font was the same, one Harold used on his laminated guides, Arial narrow. I didn't even have to ask who wrote it. When Claire got home, I handed it to her. She rolled her eyes so hard, I thought they might stay that way. "Okay," she said. "That's too much. I'll talk to him. He's grading me, Claire, on my grass." I know. He just doesn't realize how weird that is. That night, as we were eating, I noticed a white envelope sticking out of the mail pile. It was from the HOA. Inside was a warning about lawn uniformity and a polite reminder to maintain property. There was a printed photo attached. My front yard. In the corner of the picture, you could clearly see the reflection of Harold's car mirror. I stared at it for a long time. This has to be him. Claire looked at the photo and winced. Maybe someone else reported it. Someone with his exact car? She didn't answer. An hour later, Harold posted in the family group chat. It was a photo of his lawn. Bright stripes running diagonally across it like a golf course. The caption read, "Order is a form of plate. Respect for your neighbors and yourself." My phone buzzed with heart emojis from Linda and Claire's aunt. I said nothing. I stayed up late scrolling through the thread, staring at the photo of his perfect stripes. Lying in bed, I told myself to let it go. But a part of me, the part that still had his typed assessment folded on the counter, we started thinking about payback. Not screaming or fighting, just something small, something subtle, something that would remind him that not everything in life can be measured. A few weeks after the grass measuring incident, Harold invited us over for a casual barbecue. With him, casual usually meant a clipboard and an agenda, but Claire said it'd be good to keep things normal. We showed up on Saturday around noon. The smell of grilled chicken hit us the moment we stepped into his backyard. But that wasn't what caught my eye. What caught my eye was the statue. Right in the center of Harold's perfect lawn stood a bronze falcon mounted on a bright, smooth stone base. Its wings were half spread, and the beak was open like it was frozen mid-cry. It gleamed in the sunlight like it had been polished an hour ago, which, knowing Harold, it probably had. Harold was standing beside it, waiting for someone to notice. When Linda told him to sit down and eat before the burgers got cold, he said, "In a moment," then turned toward us. "Everyone," he announced, "I'd like you to meet Reginald." I almost laughed, because I thought he was joking, but then I saw the pride in his face. Claire's brother looked at the ground to hide a grin. Linda shook her head like this was the 10th statue she'd met that month. "This," Harold said, placing a hand on the falcon's back, "is the new guardian of the yard. Reginald represents vigilance and discipline, qualities a home should have." He said it like he was giving a TED talk. Neighbors drifted closer, pretending they'd just come for the food, but clearly curious about the shiny bird in the grass. One of them said, "Wow, Harold, that's a serious piece." Harold beamed. "Custom cast bronze. I picked it up from a gallery in the city. Limited edition." Another neighbor asked, "How much something like that run you?" Harold gave a small smile. "Let's just say quality comes at a price." Which, translated from Harold's speak, meant a lot. He launched into falcon symbolism and how it elevated the yard's bright narrative. Claire leaned toward me and whispered, "If he starts reciting poetry, we're leaving." When Harold finally stepped away to flip the burgers, I took out my phone and quietly snapped a picture of the statue. I didn't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe instinct. But something about that smug bird standing in the middle of his perfect yard made me want to level the playing field a little. After lunch, Harold insisted on giving a short tour of his improvements. He'd installed a new stone path leading to his shed, replaced all the edging with laser, straight metal borders, and updated the sprinkler heads to precision rotors. Every sentence started with, "You might want to consider doing this." By the time we left, my head was full of fake interest and polite smiles. As soon as we got home, I showed Claire the photo of Reginald. She groaned. "Please don't start making fun of it." "I'm not," I said, scrolling through the picture. "It's just something about it cracks me up. It's like the bird knows it's better than everyone else." She looked at me. "Evan, seriously, don't poke the bear. You know how he gets." "I'm not poking anything," I said, already opening a browser on my phone. "I just think it's kind of cool." She sighed. "That's your I'm about to do something stupid voice." She wasn't wrong. That night, after she went to bed, I sat on the couch, scrolling through online listings. I typed bronze falcon statue into the search bar, and dozens of results came up. Most were expensive, thousands for anything solid bronze. But then I noticed versions made from iron or resin. Some looked almost identical in photos, just a little smaller or lighter. I found one that looked close enough. It was about 2 feet tall, The wings half open, the same proud stance as Harold's. Price $57. Free shipping. I stared at it for a minute, then added it to the cart. The confirmation email hit my inbox, and I sat there feeling half guilty, half amused. I told myself it wasn't revenge. Not really. It was just a joke. A quiet one. When the package arrived 3 days later, I opened it on the greater porch while Claire was at work. The Falcon was lighter than I expected, but solid enough to feel legit. Its paint had a bronzed finish, not as shiny as Harold's, but close. I placed it near the front steps, not directly facing the street, but angled slightly toward Harold's house. From his kitchen window, he'd have a perfect view. I stepped back and looked at it. It fit surprisingly well, like it belonged there. Then I went inside, sat on the couch, and turned on the TV. I didn't watch a single second. I just kept glancing out the window, waiting for Harold to notice. A few minutes later, I saw movement through the blinds. His silhouette pausing on his driveway. His head tilted. He took a few steps forward, hands on hips. Even from that distance, I could tell he was staring right at it. I leaned back on the couch, trying not to grin. "Welcome to the neighborhood." Reginald Jr. first whispered. The next morning, Harold took his usual slow walk around the block. He always claimed it was exercise, but everyone knew it was really a yard inspection tour. I was trimming the red hedge when he turned the corner toward my house. He stopped, stared at the Falcon, adjusted his glasses, and stood there a solid 10 seconds. "Interesting choice, Evan," he said finally. "Yeah," I said, wiping my hands. "Thought it added some character." He nodded tightly. "Art can become clutter if one isn't careful." Then he turned and walked away. After he left, I opened my notes app and typed, "Operation Birdwatch Day 1. Falcon 1 deployed. Subject noticed. Mild irritation detected." It started as a joke, but once I wrote it, I decided to keep logging. 2 days later, I saw him edging his lawn with a metal ruler. The sun caught it like a mirror. When he noticed me watching, he waved, then quickly looked at the Falcon. Day 3. Subject, increasing maintenance, frequency. Possible overcompensation. By the weekend, he'd mowed twice. Once diagonally, once the opposite direction, so his lawn looked like a checkerboard. Claire hadn't caught on yet, she thought. It was just a decoration until Harold texted her. "Tell Evan a yard's composition can lose harmony if it imitates another yard's aesthetic. That's his way of saying it's bugging him," I said. "Please don't make it worse," she said. "I'm not," I told her. "I'm just existing." Still, I ordered another Falcon. This one was taller with wings tucked closer. I placed it by the mailbox, visible from Harold's kitchen window, both birds facing his yard. Subtle but obvious if you looked long enough. That night, he came out with his hose, froze mid-spray, then turned it off, and went inside. Day 7. Subject, avoiding eye contact, increased maintenance observed. Later that week, someone posted on Nextdoor. Anyone else noticed the bird thing? The photo showed both of my falcons. Comments poured in. "Is it art? Those birds are judging someone." Harold replied, "It's not art when it disrupts visual unity." That comment alone made everything worth it. A few days later, I saw he'd installed a small solar spotlight aimed directly at Reginald. At night, it glowed like a shrine. Day 10. Subject, installed illumination on primary statue. Possibly territorial move. Counteraction required. My counteraction came in a cardboard box 2 days later. A smaller, darker falcon. I mounted it on the fence post near the property line, forming a perfect triangle. From Harold's yard, they all faced him. From mine, it looked random. That afternoon, while I was raking leaves, he stepped out of his garage, saw it, and froze. I waved. He didn't wave back. Instead, he spent 20 minutes repositioning Reginald, in tiny increments before disappearing inside. When Claire got home, she said, "Dad texted me again. Visual clutter lowers property cohesion." "But what did you do now?" "Just added balance to the composition," I said. "Evan," she warned, "I'm not touching his yard," she sighed. "You're both ridiculous." Maybe. But I was winning. By the next weekend, Harold's routine had gone into overdrive. He was outside at dawn, trimming the same section of grass repeatedly. inspecting the ground, like something invisible was wrong. Every few minutes, his eyes darted toward my falcons. Mrs. Gray from across the street stopped by. Those birds look like they're protecting your house. I love them. Thanks, I said. That's the idea. Harold overheard and frowned so hard his face turned red. The next day, I posted a sunset photo of the neighborhood. The falcons were barely visible, tucked in the corner of the frame. The caption read, "Nice evening, at home." By morning, it had more likes than Harold's last irrigation update. Even Linda commented, "The lighting on your yard looks beautiful." Right beneath it, Harold wrote, "A entity matters." And I didn't respond. I just added one more entry. Day 15. Subject triggered. Phase 2 complete. Then I looked out the window. The 3 falcons stood quietly, catching the afternoon light. Next door, Harold was staring, again, pretending to inspect his hose. I smiled, took a sip of coffee, and whispered, "Your move, Harold." By the start of May, things were getting tense. Claire was tired of the whole lawn situation, and I couldn't exactly blame her. Every phone call with her dad turned into some comment about yard discipline or decorative restraint. She told me he'd been sleeping less, sometimes messaging her after midnight, with lines like, "Do you know what material Evan's statues are made of?" Or, "They seem to be multiplying." She'd sigh, look at me over her phone, and say, "You two are acting like kids." I'm not doing anything. I said, "I just own birds." He's the one losing sleep. "Yeah, but you're enjoying it," she said. She wasn't wrong. At work, my coworkers found the story hilarious. We'd been joking about it during lunch breaks ever since I showed them pictures. They'd started calling it bird chess. "Dude," my friend Marcus said one day, "you gotta start moving them around in patterns. Like one night, they're facing north, next night east." Mess with his head. I pretended I hadn't already thought of it. "That would be immature," I said. He grinned. "So, you're doing it tonight then?" I didn't answer. That weekend, I noticed Harold's lawn wasn't perfect anymore. A small, brown patch had formed near the flower bed. Maybe the size of a dinner plate. His hedges weren't trimmed straight, either. One corner dipped lower than the rest. Tiny flaws. But on Harold's property, they stood out like graffiti on a white wall. He'd walk outside several times a day, pretending to check his sprinklers, but mostly staring at my plant birds. I'd catch him jotting notes in that pocket notebook. One morning, I saw him rearrange Reginald by a few inches, then step back and stare at it like he was trying to read a message. I didn't. I moved my falcons that day. I just let him stew. A few days later, Claire said, "Let's have them over for dinner. Maybe it'll calm things down." I said, "Sure," but I had doubts. We cleaned the house, I mowed the lawn, and Claire made baked pasta and salad. Everything was peaceful until the doorbell rang. Harold and Linda stepped in carrying a dessert plate. Linda smiled. Harold nodded stiffly. His eyes immediately flicked toward the living room window that faced the yard. For the first 10 minutes, he didn't say a word about the food, the house, or anything else. He just kept glancing outside. Finally, during dinner, he said it. "You're mocking me?" Claire's fork froze midair. "Dad," she said, quietly. He looked straight at me. "Those birds, the poses, the angles, it's deliberate." I set my glass down. "I'm decorating my yard. That's all. Don't lie to me, Evan." His tone was sharp but steady. "You've positioned them to copy mine. You're trying to steal attention." I raised an eyebrow. "Steal attention? You mean from Reginald?" Linda sighed. "Harold, please, no, let him talk. We said, you've been posting photos, Evan. You want people to think your setup's better than mine." "Hold on," I said. "You're the one who reported me to the HOA for non-uniform grass height. You started this." He straightened. "Standards matter. If you maintain your lawn properly, you don't get notices. I was maintaining it until you showed up with a ruler." He ignored that. "You're using the wrong kind of mower. You're tearing the blades. It's what causes uneven coloration. You need to sharpen the dad." Claire snapped. "Enough." The room went quiet. Linda reached over and touched his arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. He finally exhaled and muttered, "I'm just saying. A yard says a lot about a man." I bit my tongue. The last thing I wanted was to escalate. But it was too late. The air in the room felt heavy. Claire pushed her chair back and stood up. Dinner's over. Both of you, stop acting like this. No one argued. We finished in awkward silence. Harold helped clear the table without a word. Then they left early. After the door closed, Claire stood by the window, arms crossed. You couldn't let it go for one night. He came here ready to fight. I said. She turned. And you didn't stop him. There wasn't anything I could say that wouldn't make it worse. The house felt too quiet once they were gone. We didn't talk for the rest of the night. Claire went to bed early. I stayed in the living room scrolling through messages from Marcus. He'd sent a photo of a bird, meme with the caption, Commander Evan, and the Falcon Battalion. I almost laughed, then didn't. I turned off the lights and looked outside. The 3 falcons stood in the moonlight. Shadows, stretching long across the grass. Next door, Harold's porch light flicked on. His blinds shifted like someone was peeking out. For a long minute, nothing moved. Then I saw the curtain fall back into place. I went out to take the trash to the curb, still thinking about the dinner. The argument kept replaying in my head, every word sharp and petty. I passed the mailbox, stopped, and stared at the nearest falcon. Its head tilted toward Harold's house just slightly, an excessed inch off from the last time I checked. I don't even remember deciding to do it, but I reached out and rotated the statue. 2 inches. Maybe 3. Just enough. When I stepped back, it looked right, again, balanced. I stood there another minute, listening to the sprinklers starting down the street. The night air smelled like wet grass and smoke from someone's barbecue. For a second I wondered what Harold was doing, probably standing by his window, wondering if I'd moved it on purpose. I smiled a little to myself and walked back inside. I told myself it wasn't revenge anymore. It was just maintenance. After that dinner, things went quiet. Too quiet. Harold stopped coming by, and Claire said their calls had gotten shorter. No more midnight texts about grass density or mower blades. The family group chat went from daily updates to the occasional good morning from Linda. Even Harold's Instagram, his so-called photo journal, went dark for a man who used to post weekly pictures of his lawn with captions like, order through care. The silence felt strange. Neighbors started to notice, too. Mr. Jensen across the street mentioned he hadn't seen Harold out in the mornings, not even for his routine edging. Someone else said his sprinklers hadn't gone off in days. For Harold, that was the suburban version of a missing persons report. Claire tried calling him a few times, but he'd only answer with short replies. Everything fine, Dad? Just busy doing what? Things around the house. But when she offered to stop by, he'd say, no need. It went on like that for 2 weeks. Every time I looked toward his place, I saw the same thing. Closed blinds, no movement. No lights in the yard. Reginald still stood there under his spotlight, gleaming like a trophy no one cared about anymore. One night around 1:40 inches the morning, I got up for a drink of water. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge. I glanced out the kitchen window, and that's when I saw him. Harold was standing in the grass between our yards, wearing plaid pajama pants and slippers, holding a flashlight in one hand and his measuring tape in the other. He was crouched low, shining the light at the edge of the property line. Measuring the height of the grass, his head moved back and forth as he mumbled numbers. I stood there frozen behind the curtain. I didn't move or say anything, watching him bent over in the dark. I didn't feel smug or amused. I just felt uneasy. He worked his way slowly down the line, marking something in a little notepad, then straightened up and looked at my falcons. The beam of the flashlight lingered on them for a few seconds. Then, he shut it off and walked back inside, without a word. The next morning, Reginald was gone. All that was left was a pale ring of grass where he'd been standing. Like someone had lifted a monument. I stared at that empty space for a long time. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like an ending. Claire noticed it too. He took it down? She asked. I guess she frowned. That's not like him. That afternoon, she drove over to check on him. When she came back, she looked tired. He's not doing great, she said quietly. What happened? He said, he's been overwhelmed. He's embarrassed about the yard. Said it's gotten out of control. He thinks everyone's judging him. Judging him? I said nobody cares about. She cut me off. To him, it's not just grass. It's his thing. It's what he's good at. He said he can't make anything perfect anymore. I didn't know what to say. Claire told me she offered to help him clean up, but he refused. He said he needs time, she added, over the Wannix. Next few days, the silence got heavier. Mail started piling up in his box. The porch lights stayed off at night. From the street, you could see dead leaves collecting along the edges of his walkway. The hedges had gone wild, branches sticking out like unseed hair. Then, on Thursday morning, Mrs. Gray, from across the street, knocked on our door. "Have you heard from Harold?" she asked. "I've been trying to drop off soup, but no one answers." Claire's face went pale. "He's not answering." Mrs. Gray shook her head. "His car is still in the driveway," Claire called. No answer. She called again. Nothing. Finally, she called the non-emergency number for a red wellness check. An officer came by later that afternoon. Harold was fine, physically anyway. The officer said he'd been a little disoriented and hadn't left the house in days. Linda was visiting her sister out of town, so no one had noticed. When Claire and I went over afterward, Harold looked smaller, somehow. He sat in his recliner, with the blinds half closed. His hair was messy. His shirt wrinkled. The air in the house smelled like stale coffee and dust. He tried to play it off. "I'm fine, just tired," he said. Claire kneeled next to him. "Dad, you scared us." "I just needed a break," he said. "Got behind on things. It happens." But when I glanced out his back window, I saw what behind meant. Brown patches spreading through the yard, flower beds overrun with weeds, tools scattered across the patio. The man who used to measure soil moisture every day hadn't watered anything in weeks. We stayed about an hour. Claire tidied the kitchen while I rad some leaves from the front walk. Harold didn't stop me, but he didn't thank me either. He just watched from the doorway. Quiet. The next morning, I stood in my own yard and looked over at the empty space where Reginald used to stand. My falcons were still there. All three. Lined up exactly as before. Their bronze paint catching the sun. They looked ridiculous now, like props left over from a joke that had gone too far. I turned one of them to face away from his house. It didn't help. When Claire came into the kitchen, she said quietly, "Mom's talking about him moving to stay with Aunt Susan for a while. Somewhere quieter." I nodded. Neither of us spoke after that. The dishwasher hummed and I stared at the empty lawn next door, thinking about how it started with a ruler and a few blades of grass. Now, I would have given anything to go back to that day and tell him to stop measuring, because maybe if I had, he wouldn't have kept going until everything broke. 2 weeks after the wellness check, Harold decided to move in with his sister Susan for a while. Linda came back from her trip and handled most of the packing, but Claire wanted to help. She asked if I'd come along, and I said yes. We went over on a Saturday morning. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The perfect symmetry and spotless lines were gone. Boxes sat stacked in the living room, labeled in Linda's neat meter and handwriting. The smell of fertilizer had been replaced by dust and stale air. Harold was at the kitchen table wrapping cups and newspaper. He looked up and smiled. "Morning," he said. "Coffee, still hot." His voice was steadier than I expected. He poured me a cup, moving slower than usual. On the counter behind him sat his old tape measure beside a pair of gloves. It wasn't clipped to his belt anymore. Claire hugged him. "You look better," she said. "Trying to," he said. "Sleeping more helps." We started in the garage. It was still organized, though coated in dust. The labeled shelves were there. The laminated charts. The racks of tools. Some boxes were sealed, others half filled with things he couldn't quite let go of: sprinklers, cords, old seed packets, arranged by year. I opened one bin and found photo albums. The first was labeled Family Yard Projects. Inside were photos of Claire as a kid holding a rake almost her size. In every picture, Harold was beside her, pointing at something. Smiling. Really smiling. Notes were scribbled in the margins. April 1998. Claire planted her first rose bush. June 2001. Sprinkler upgrade. Claire helped dig trench. I showed her the page. She smiled. He used to bribe me with ice cream to weed. Harold came over and chuckled. "You remember those old hoses? They'd burst every summer. You kept everything," Claire said. "Couldn't throw away good memories." We flipped through a few more pages. Then, he said, retirement got quiet. The yard gave me something to manage. Kept my head busy. I get that, I said. I looked up. I shouldn't have turned it into a contest. You didn't have to measure my grass to prove a point, I said. He gave a small smile. I know. I forgot people aren't projects. It wasn't much, but it was enough. By afternoon, most of the boxes were ready. Linda and Claire packed dishes while I tidied the garage. As I was leaving, Harold stopped me. Hang on, he said, opening a small wooden box on the workbench. Inside was his old tape measure, the one I'd seen clipped to his belt 100 times. He handed it to me along with a folded note. I opened it later after we'd loaded the car. In his neat handwriting, it said, I measured everything except time. Take care of each other. On the way home, Claire looked out the window. He seems at peace now, she said. I think he's finally letting go, I said. When we got back, I went out to the yard. The 3 falcons were still there, but they didn't look funny anymore. Just quiet reminders. I turned them all to face our porch instead of Harold's house. It looked better that way. Or maybe I just needed it too. A few days later, I mowed the lawn, not for appearance or revenge. Just because it needed it. I moved slower than usual, steady and even not caring about perfect lines. When I finished, I stood on the porch with a glass of water, watching the sunlight slide across the grass. For the first time in months, it felt like it belonged to me. That evening, Claire and I sat on the front steps as the sky turned orange. She leaned on my shoulder. Mom says he's settling in. She said, he's already planting a garden at Aunt Susan's. I smiled. Sounds like him. She nodded. We should visit soon. Maybe bring him that photo album. I want to put the pages in a new binder. Yeah, I said, he'd like that. We sat there quietly, listening to the sprinklers down the street. The air smelled like cut grass, again, clean and calm. When the porch light flicked on, I went inside, dropped Harold's tape measure into the junk drawer, and shut it softly. Every now and then when I dig through for batteries, I see it. Dented, old, the numbers barely visible. I never use it. I don't need numbers anymore to know when something's right. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube, this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your